With all the hype that's surrounding the launch of Halo Infinite in November, we're going to look today at some of the fan theories surrounding what might make sense with the launch of Halo Infinite, and maybe one or two that probably don't make much sense at all. But yeah, relax back, I've got this, we'll take it from here. So the first fan theory that's come up is a fairly simple one. Cortana wins, mostly. So Cortana has like an army of AIs at her every whim, basically, in a world that's pretty much dependent on technology. I say world, I mean like universe. That means that she will have conquered most of developed civilization in Halo Infinite, like she started off at the end of Halo 5. Her Guardian police will no doubt have taken control of most of the colonies out there. Though there are sure to have been rebellions, fans know how ruthless Cortana can be. She's pretty on the line. I'm sure you've seen the way she spoke to John at the end of Halo 5 when she put them in a cryptum. Even John couldn't persuade her, so it was pretty strong movement from her in terms of how she reacted to things. Now, with her Guardians, Prometheans, and all her other enforcers, it's pretty unlikely that there are many places that aren't under her rule. After all, humanity only just managed to escape the clutches of the Covenant, and then they found themselves taken over by a shirty AI who thinks they're better than everyone else. So next up, we have an idea where fans suspect that if Cortana doesn't have control of at least some of the rings, which it's a stretch, but let's go with it for now, she's certainly aware of them. Alright, so she knows about these rings. She definitely does. It's also accepted that she's been hunting down key people, such as the people aboard the Infinity. We know this from all of the background lore with the comics and the books. She is actively hunting Infinity. So this makes it likely that she knows that the Infinity possibly might have crash landed on Zeta Halo. So Halo Infinite could start, I say could start with the Master Chief rescuing survivors and trying to get off Zeta Halo. You know, there is the Banished. The Banished are now in the game, and they will likely want to restore the ring's power. It's also the last remaining original ring from the first 12, despite being made inert by Master Chief after what he did to the Ark in Halo 3. The next one is an interesting one. So here we have the idea that Chief might be after something on Zeta Halo. So Cortana and Master Chief might not have a romantic relationship in the sense. If you haven't seen that video that I made, then you know, take a look up there. But they are still very close. One can't separate from a joined AI that easily. All right, it's not an easy thing to do, especially, you know, a Spartan who's only got a few close contacts and connections. John, I should say, knows that he needs to stop Cortana, but that doesn't mean necessarily pulling the plug on her. So there is a fan theory out there that Zeta Halo is the home of a device that will allow Master Chief to disconnect Cortana from the domain. However, it will also prevent her from dying, as it were. This is what we were dealing with at the end of Halo 4. Now, this theory puts the whole Cortana controlled by the Gravemind option right down there. It kind of puts it away to one side. But it's in a more interesting way. Alright, so perhaps it could help the player choose to use the item, maybe at a cost of someone, to save Cortana and then unite against the Gravemind. It's an idea. It's a little bit of a long shot, but it's not totally out of the realm of possibility. Now, this fan theory is probably my most favourite, but that's only because I am a lore nut. So the idea is that Mendicant Bias, who was an AI of the Forerunners and was involved in the first war against the Flood with the Forerunner Flood War, he ends up helping. So hear me out, okay? This is probably the biggest theory on this list. So those of you who are fans of the lore will remember that Mendicant Bias is another totally OP AI, or Ancilla as the Forerunners call them, and they fell victim to the Gravemind. So Mendicant Bias actually ended up fighting for the Flood in the Forerunner Flood War, and he was actually taken on by another AI called Offensive Bias, who was brought up to deal with the situation. Mendicant Bias has been imprisoned for thousands of years. All right, the AI is not dead, and it's already sought redemption by helping Master Chief once before. If you've played Halo 3 and you've seen the terminals, you may have seen a good little bit there surrounding Mendicant Bias trying to guide and help Master Chief. Mendicant Bias was actually on High Charity, or at least a fragment of him was, during the events of Halo 2 and into Halo 3. So you will find that there is a lot of lore and background surrounding Halo that shows that Mendicant Bias actually tried to help humanity while they were fighting the Covenant, which we'll cover in a different video. But in short, Mendicant helps Cortana realise that the Gravemind has made a puppet out of her at the end of Halo 2, and Master Chief reunites with the good Cortana, and with the help of Mendicant Bias and a few rebels and the UNSC themselves, they take out the Gravemind, effectively. That's what happens in Halo 3. And furthermore, Mendicant may or may not know of a cure to the Flood. More likely, however, Master Chief needs to destroy the ring, like he usually does in Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3. You get the idea. And this is probably the biggest fan service idea out of all of the ones that we've discussed in this video. The Spirit of Fire returns. For those of you who don't know the Spirit of Fire, this is a UNSC vessel that was lost after the sacrifice of its slip-space drive. And it's actually the main focus of the game Halo Wars and Halo Wars 2 as well. And Halo Wars 2 actually sees the Spirit of Fire take on the Banished. So you're having that connection between the Halo first-person games and the Halo strategy games, and how the Covenant and the Banished link together. It's kind of the missing piece between Halo Infinite and the Banished, and how it all comes together. But anyway, as I said, the Spirit of Fire was declared lost because it had to sacrifice its slip-space drive in order to blow something up. However, fans also know that it ended up at the Ark fighting the Banished 28 years later. So it was actually at Installation 00. Alright, it found its way there, and it was fighting the Banished on the Ark in Halo Wars 2. Great game, you should definitely check it out. Now, it's assumed that Professor Ellen Anders, who was the lead scientist aboard the Spirit of Fire, ended up stranded there, but was intercepted by a Guardian, because obviously Cortana, Halo 5, the created. So this theory has the Spirit of Fire rescuing Anders from, I don't know, wherever she ended up, then tracking down Master Chief. Now, of course, this is after they've fully caught up on all of Cortana's shenanigans. I love that word, shenanigans. It's a great word. Not used enough. Anyway, the ship in this idea would play a key role in the battle against her and her armies, as she tries to fire the rings to eliminate the impending flood threat. And having the Spirit of Fire return wouldn't be out of the realm of logical possibility, but as I said at the beginning, it would feel possibly a little bit too much like a fan service. That being said, I'm totally okay with fan service, because how else do you get people to get so hyped about your game? Alright, one bonus one, which I wanted to add on to this, was the idea, and this is, again, a bit of a stretch, but Master Chief has the imprint, or is, or however you want to interchange the middle section of this, but Master Chief is the Iso-Didact. Now, hardcore fans will know that 343 Guilty Spark wasn't always called that. Very long time ago, he was actually a human named Chakas, whose mind got transferred into a monitor, alright, which is that kind of orb that you see right here. But he was to be saved thanks to his Gaius, or gene song, which is basically like a genetic need to do something. It's an enforcement on a species that can be passed on through bloodlines. So you effectively program your future generations. Now, his lines to Master Chief in Halo Combat Evolved seem to indicate that John has a similar genetic imperative. We see this in the way that the Librarian AI in the middle of Halo 4 manages to evolve John forward in order to deal with what goes on with the Composer at the end of Halo 4. Now, this connects to Born Stellar, who was a Forerunner Manipulator, who is someone who's kind of learning and growing, and an Iso-Didact. So they are an image of the original Didact that we introduce ourselves into in Halo 4, while we think that it's, you know, a signal that's been sent out, and we end up finding out that we've been manipulated. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so basically what happens is the Iso-Didact is known as Born Stellar. He's a Forerunner Manipulator, becomes the Iso-Didact, and he was first asked by 343 Guilty Spark if he had the choice or the same position as 343. Born Stellar said to 343, would you do the same thing? Would you fire the rings to get rid of the Flood? Now, Guilty Spark responds saying that his answer, and I quote, has not changed to Master Chief, because while they're walking into the control room in Halo 1, Guilty Spark actually says, my answer has not changed since the last time you asked me. Now, obviously, Chief wasn't there the last time he was asked would he fire the rings. So he goes on to say that Master Chief must have remembered this, and he's been with Guilty Spark this whole time after all. Now, this implies that Master Chief might be an imprint or a Gaius or a gene song of the Didact, and he will contain the, you know, the genetic imperative, if you will, and the memories of the Forerunners somewhere in his brain. Now, having this millennia-long destiny for Master Chief feels more than a little over the top, in my opinion. However, it does fall in line with the kind of background and setup of Halo lore, the motif, if you will. It's very much on point for this kind of, you know, universe-spanning something to do with like the fates of things and how things come together, and people think they're in control but they're really not. So as much as it would be a great thing to see, possibly, if they do it well, it is a little far-fetched, which is why I added it in as a bonus. So yeah, if you feel that, you know, any of these are a good idea, comment down below, or if you've got a better idea, definitely tell me. I would love to have a chat with you about that one, but drop it down below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe, maybe click that thumb button if you want. Don't have to, only if you like it. But as always, happy gaming.